So the idea of facilities like these in the sort of post-COVID application is, I mean, anything that's as useful as PCR, it has an application in diagnostics, but it has so many more applications. That's like one of, the 100 things it can do. So for people to be able to, be smart, have bright ideas, and actually now to be able to sort of access this technology in an area that's local to them, right? Because I mean, this is, in the heart of London here. Behind us there is Imperial College London. Over here is Stanhope's Development, White City Place. It's been fantastic to partner with them on this. Just behind you there is actually the entrance to the Central Line, the White City Station Central Line. So it's quite an incredible place for biotechnology. I guess when technology started to change was when you had a really, really low cost entry point for people in their bedrooms to start websites, people in small co-working spaces to be able to start designing web apps that can really impact people in a big way. And I think where we're at in biotechnology and what's been a big passion of OpenCell is bringing down the barriers to entry for biotechnology. That's kind of been our I guess as our core value, that would be just it. If you were to summarize what we do, we try to break down barriers to doing biotechnology. If it costs £10,000 to do it, is there a way we could do it for £1,000, or is there a way we could do it for 100? Because the more accessibility you create, the more kind of creative personalities and different types of people that start getting involved in it. So, to draw the analogy with technology, a couple of things started to happen, right? So you had this low-cost barrier to entry, and as well as that, you started to see these hubs forming, the kind of Silicon Valleys, that sort of thing. And I think here, what's really amazing, just in terms of like that sort of, critical mass, I guess, what started to happen is that you've got Imperial College here with all that amazing talent, all of these really smart guys doing biotechnology. It's a huge amount of what goes on there. You also have a whole host of kind of like space providers and sort of environmental like facilitators. So two great examples that we're really delighted to partner with as well are Huckletree, based right here, where they provide amazing co-working space, really just easy for people to get a desk and get started with whatever it is they're working on. As well as that, W12 is an amazing bar restaurant where people can just really get together and have a couple of drinks and do that creative stuff. And I think what's begun in this sort of big melting pot of biotechnology and creativity here in White City, sort of at the edge of London's creative scene, what's begun to happen is all of a sudden the cost of doing biotechnology is sort of going like this, really getting to the point where, at OpenCell, we've made it possible now for people to access hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment for hundreds of pounds a month. And what that means is that a guy with an idea can sort of turn up, pull together just enough money or beg, borrow, steal just enough money to be able to show some kind of drug or some kind of concept or some kind of biotechnology tool that can get them to the next stage. And we're hoping to make that easier and easier and easier and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So you're seeing the cost of sequencing DNA, that's plummeted. You're seeing it like a kind of a Moore's law in terms of computer chips, the way these processor sizes got smaller and smaller and cheaper and cheaper. So you're seeing DNA, which is like the core sort of programming language of biology, that's becoming cheaper and cheaper. You can also make DNA. You can also send away now to have DNA made for next to nothing, and it arrives like the following day. So I think I bought like for £100 yesterday, I bought a bunch of genomes, amazing stuff. So you're seeing those two key things. And then I think that enabling technology that we're providing around just access to the facilities to do biotechnology, sort of the PCR technologies that you're constantly hearing about on the news, being able to access those expensive pieces of asset, or the DNA sequencers that you're talking about. And these two labs, one is obviously dedicated to doing community-based PCR testing, but another is a little bit of a first of its kind, a rapid response viral mutant monitoring lab, which allows us to look at that little viral genome and see if there's any changes in it that we should be worried about. Obviously, we're having an explosion in vaccines, diagnostics, drugs, therapeutics, all of these amazing things that are going to help us live better, longer, more fulfilling lives. But at the same time, you're also starting to see, because biotechnology is like everything. I mean, my cotton trousers and my woolen shorts are like biological fabrics, right? Biological fabrics are sort of the traditional fabric. Now we have people looking at sustainability and sort of the problems of how do we build fabrics and materials and, maybe even plastics that can be sustainable. And really the answer is always to turn to biology, because you've sort of got a programming set, a set of languages that's been developed over whatever it is, 2 billion years or something. So you've got a lot of knowledge built up there in that sort of ecosphere. So I think where, one area of opportunity in biotechnology that now you've got creatives coming from, some people in computational science, some people in actual fashion design, some people from, the built environment or construction industries. You've got all these people piling into biotechnology because they can now grow stuff. They can maybe make it cheaper. They can make it so that it degrades. They can make it last longer. They could do all these different things using these DNA technologies they just couldn't have done before. On top of that, again, another sort of biological discipline that touches us all, right, and always has, is food. You've never eaten plastic. You've always eaten stuff that's been made, by nature itself, right? Food's grown naturally. But at the same time, there's a whole spectrum there of opportunities in, food culturing that can sort of change the way we work, right? So as well as the stuff that's grown, you've also got tons of stuff that we've always eaten, which you may not realize, but is sort of a, modified product, right? It's like we take something like, sugar, and we add a little bit of yeast, and all of a sudden you've got all these amazing flavors of beer and alcohol, right? Same thing with bread. Bread wouldn't be a lot of fun without yeast. So really, like the microorganisms that are doing all the sort of grunt work, all the smart work, let's say, really designing the finished product for you, have always just been neglected. When you're making bread, I mean, bread wouldn't be very tasty if we didn't have, the microorganisms. It would just be a pile of sort of wet wheat. It'd be pretty gross, actually. And sort of coupled with that, we've got a whole range of potential cuisines that can be impacted by the understanding of our own microbiome, so the own, sort of bugs that roll around inside of us, as well as, the kind of bugs that are out there in society, as well as, cheeses and all that. So I think that's sort of like, to me, just a few bits of biotechnology that are sort of really at their sort of, apex of the hockey stick, if you want to call it that, or that are really just sort of starting to hit prime time. So you'll see this in economics as well. So you've started to see companies that are actually doing this. So there's companies in fabrics like Modern Meadow or Bolt Threads that are really making clothes using biology. Or you've actually seen these guys like Beyond Meats or Impossible Burgers who are actually using biotechnology to ultimately make foods that we can eat. Definitely, on the RNA extraction, the sequencing side, those again are those sort of core technologies where, some people are using it to, detect all sorts of things. So you can use it for, screening people for potentially someone who might have that sort of BRCA mutation that has a propensity for breast or prostate cancer. By knowing that and having that information, it can really create, better healthcare outcomes. But at the same time, PCR also teaches us a lot about the environment around us. So we can look at, potential infectious agents around us. We've seen people who are looking at, the genome of yeast in beer and trying to figure out the flavors of beer so they can start to design new beers, right? So there's lots of applications in spaces where, biology has the potential to touch us. I touched on clothing earlier. The same technology can be used there too. So you've sort of got healthcare, food, beverages, and of course, clothing and fabric. Not to mention, I guess, kind of like the built environment. I mean, if there was a way that we could begin to sort of harness the knowledge of nature in, how it produces, energy that, can feed us all, is that something we can now use to solve our, energy crises? So these are all the sort of starting points of, applications in biotechnology that encompass PCR, DNA, and of course RNA extraction. Our hope is that COVID goes away, never comes back, and that would be the dream. If that happens, what's amazing is that all the technology that's been used here, a lot of it's only, 5, 10, 15 years old. And what that means is that this technology, like doing PCR diagnostics, DNA sequencing, these are sort of the tools of, let's say, the biotech future, where we start, treating people with cancer by, first of all, looking at their genome, seeing if we can tailor the particular therapeutic treatments to their particular genes, or developing, instead of, cancer therapies like chemotherapy, where we're really just, almost killing people, but it kills the cancer cells just a little bit quicker. Can we create like targeted therapeutics that, bind to a little bit of protein and go straight to the cell that's causing the problem? So tools like that really require the same stuff to build them, right? They need PCR, they need DNA sequencing, they need the facilities to be able to do all of that in. So just over here, funnily enough, right behind our laboratories in White City Place, we're going to take some retail space and we're going to convert it into laboratories. It's a really good time for this, because actually in the UK there's been maybe a little bit too much retail space built, particularly in the kind of high street area. People are moving online, that kind of thing, and a lot of businesses have been slow to adapt. So there's a lot of vacant retail space. So what's been really exciting is looking at that retail space. We feel it's a really good space for biotechnology. So what it has is very good ceiling heights, really good floor to ceiling, has really good ventilation, because when you're cooking food or something like this, you really need to get the air out of there. Again, something that's important about biotechnology is airflow. Alongside that is really good temperature control and really good control of the various gases like nitrogen and carbon dioxide that you need for doing biotechnology. So we've been really excited to partner with Stanhope here in converting what is a series of retail spaces into biotech labs. And as well as that, taking advantage of the fact that those high street spaces have great road frontage. So can we also start to engage with the community and create a kind of theater of biotech, communicating with people, on the sort of white lab coats and all these funny instruments that they may not have a familiarity with. Can we make this something that becomes more normal, and can we create a kind of a dialogue with society around these biotechnology tools, which, in some cases have really just been extraordinary. We've seen what's happened over the last 12 months and how biotechnology has helped society. So yeah, really exciting time, I think. Yeah.